Most historians agree that there was a man called Jesus of Nazareth, and he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. In fact, the historians of the day, not just biblical sources, but the historians of the day repeatedly confirmed that there was a man called Jesus of Nazareth and that he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. People like Tacitus, the Roman historian from circa 116 AD, he wrote about Jesus of Nazareth and the fact that he was crucified, and the followers believed that he came back to life after death. Josephus, who was a Jewish historian circa 93 AD, he wrote the same. In fact, when you read some of Josephus's writings, you get the sense that he was a Christian, but he wasn't. He was a Jewish historian just observing the events of the day and recording them so that we could remember them 2,000 years later. Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, and more all document this guy called Jesus of Nazareth, a man who seemingly committed no wrong and was executed, crucified by the Romans, and whose followers believed that he rose from the dead because he was the Son of God. In fact, I'm going to put a picture on the screen. You probably won't be able to see it in great detail. You see sort of in the middle of this, you might see roughly the sketchings of a cross, of a man on a cross. And then on the left-hand side, you might just see a head and the arms of someone else, and then you can see a bit of writing underneath. Can you make that out just about? If you can't, I'd love you to Google it. It's called, this thing which you should Google, it is called, what's it called? It's called Alexamenos Graffitio. Alexamenos Graffitio. And this little figure on the left-hand side that you might or might not be able to make out is Alexamenos. And the writing underneath says, Alexamenos worships his God. And on the cross, you can see a man, and you might be able to notice that he's got the head of a donkey. So he's got the head of the donkey, the body of the human, and this guy, Alexamenos, is worshipping him. And this graffiti is actually mocking. It's an insult to Christians. It's making fun of Christians, saying, look at Alexamenos. He's worshipping a guy, like a dead guy on a cross who's got the head of a donkey. And this goes all the way back to the 1st century. And so this historical idea that there was this man called Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified by the Romans under Pontius Pilate and whose followers believed he was actually the Son of God, that is so real because they've got graffiti from the 1st century mocking these Christians, making fun of these Christians for believing that Jesus was the Son of God. There's so much evidence. His followers, the disciples, they all claim to have seen Jesus alive after he died. Now, I'm not talking about one or two people. It says in Colossians that 500 people saw Jesus alive after he died. Now, the main followers, the main disciples, the ones we know of, are the 12, what we call apostles. And these 12 apostles, including the guy who replaced Judas, all of them said they saw Jesus after he died. And then all of them were transformed completely from being maybe timid or so not very bold about their faith. Remember, Peter denied Jesus. Thomas doubted Jesus. They weren't massively impressive people. But then they were all transformed and went out, spread across the world, proclaiming, telling everybody that Jesus was alive and that he is God and that he came to bring them salvation. Now, not only did they do that, and that transformation in their characters was pretty big in itself, but they actually all, apart from one, were killed for their faith. They all died for telling people that Jesus rose from the dead. The one who didn't was John. And John, it says, historians tell us, was actually boiled in oil and survived and died of old age. So they all went through persecution, arrest, torture, and most of them went to their deaths because they believed that they'd seen Jesus risen. Now, we know that there are people who die for a belief nowadays, but those people are convinced of something. However, these guys, they claimed that they saw Jesus alive after he died. Now, if they were making it up, they were the ones who knew they didn't really see Jesus. You with me? Because they knew whether this was true or false. They were aware, actually, this thing about Jesus, we're lying. They would have known if they were lying. They would have known if they'd actually stolen Jesus' body and hid it. They would have known that for a fact. So the fact that they were willing to go to torture and death, and even in the face of torture and a painful death, they still wouldn't admit to making this thing up. It's because it wasn't made up. I mean, there's some theories people put out there going, it was a mass hallucination. But that's not how hallucinations work. That these 12 guys had a mass hallucination. And not just these 12 guys, the 500 people who saw him all hallucinated it and had the same hallucination at the same time, and it was all identical, and to the point where 4 of them wrote accounts and they all sync up and they're called the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. That doesn't make any sense. There was no way this was a mass hallucination. I love the idea that they were like, what should we have for breakfast? Let's have mushrooms. And they all ate the wrong type of mushroom together. All 500 of them them and all had the same hallucination at the same time. It just makes no sense. Why would they do that? They didn't. The only logical conclusion is they went to the death saying that Jesus was alive is because Jesus was alive. Another thing was the empty tomb. Like, there's so much to this. I've made so many notes. But the fact that the tomb was empty, that was the Roman soldiers and the enemies of the early church. They admitted and attested that the tomb was empty, and they tried to explain it away like the body was stolen. But we knew from the passage we read that there was a huge rock in front of the tomb. Another one of the Gospels talks about how there were Roman guards guarding the tomb. The body wouldn't have been stolen. If the body had been stolen, the guys who stole it would have known they'd stole it and wouldn't have gone to the deaths pretending that they hadn't stolen it. At some point during the torture, they'd gone, "We're only messing, guys. It was just a joke." The body couldn't have been stolen. The tomb was empty. The empty tomb is a message that this is real. The fact that this all sprung up in Jerusalem as well, the place where the empty tomb was. I mean, if you wanted to disprove something, the place where all this sprung up would be the place to disprove it. If there was a different nation going, "Oh yeah, back in Israel, thousands of miles away, a place which you can't go to and check this story out," this guy, like, they could have maybe made the story up there, but not in Jerusalem, where the events actually took place. It just doesn't make sense. Some people say maybe it's just a legend that developed over years, but legends, they take a legend like King Arthur and the Round Table. It takes 1,000 years to develop a legend. It doesn't happen quickly. It's folklore. It's one person telling another person a story and then telling the next generation the story. And as the story gets passed down, it gets elaborated on, and there's a sword and the stone, and it's all like that's where a legend comes from. But there wasn't time for legend to develop. Some of Paul's writings were as early as 20 years after this point. And these writings, he refers to events that have already happened. So within these 20 years, there wasn't time for legend to develop. It can only be logically one thing, that they were talking about something that actually took place. The final theory which there is called the swoon theory, that Jesus didn't die, that he actually survived. Now, the Romans were experts at killing people and experts at torturing people. This is something they put on their CVs. Like, what can you do? I can make coffee. Well, I can kill someone in a way that takes days for them to die. It's like, oh, wow, okay, that's a good skill, marketable. Imagine your LinkedIn. Put that on your LinkedIn, guys. It wouldn't go down so well. But these guys were experts in it. And it also records in the Gospels to check he was dead, that he was stabbed and his heart sac was pierced and the blood and water came out. Blood and water being an interesting detail because only physicians would have known that a mixture of blood and water would come out in those days. They didn't have the anatomical expertise that maybe we have in the West. To be honest, most of us, unless we've gone to medical school, wouldn't know that fact. So Jesus was definitely dead. If he wasn't dead, he would have been half dead. And no one's going to worship and go themselves to death to worship a guy who is pretty much half dead. He would have got pity, not worship, right? He would have got pity, not worship. Jesus is alive.